In the quiet town of 1858, the Prescott brothers, Edward and Samuel, grew up in a modest wooden house on the edge of farmland. Their father had died young, leaving their mother to raise them with values of hard work and faith. Edward, the elder, was known for his patience and wisdom, while Samuel was full of laughter and daring spirit. Though different in temperament, they were inseparable, working in the fields, sharing meals, and protecting each other from hardships. Their friendship was more than brotherhood. It was a bond forged in love, sacrifice, and resilience. The year 1858 fell within a time when medical science was still in its infancy. Many rural communities lacked trained physicians, and even the best doctors of the era were limited by poor diagnostic tools. Diseases like tuberculosis, cholera, and influenza claimed countless lives, and fainting spells, comas, or shock were often mistaken for death. Without stethoscopes of modern precision or methods to monitor breathing and heartbeat accurately, a silent chest or weak pulse could convince a doctor that life had ended. This uncertainty gave rise to one of the most haunting fears of the Victorian age: premature burial. Newspapers occasionally carried terrifying accounts of coffins being reopened, only to find claw marks on the lid or twisted bodies inside. To combat this, safety coffins, with bells, flags, or breathing tubes, were later invented. But in many towns, especially poor rural ones, such precautions were unknown or unaffordable. The Prescott brothers lived against this backdrop of fragile medical knowledge. In their small town, death was accepted as a constant presence, but so was the fear that someone might be declared dead too soon. This reality would one day come to test Edward Prescott's faith, instincts, and courage. The winter of 1858 was particularly cruel. Bitter winds swept across the Prescott farm, and food was scarce. Samuel, only 17, had always been full of restless energy, but the long months of hard work in the cold left his body frail. What began as a simple cough grew worse by the week, draining the life from his once spirited frame. His mother did all she could with herbal remedies, and Edward stayed up late at night tending to his younger brother. But without modern medicine, illness often had the final word. One morning Samuel failed to wake. His chest barely stirred, his breath was shallow, and his pulse was too faint for the town doctor to detect. After a brief examination, the doctor solemnly declared what the family feared most: Samuel Prescott was dead. Grief engulfed the household. Neighbors gathered to console the family, and preparations for burial began almost immediately, as was custom in those days. But Edward could not rest. When he had clasped Samuel's hand before the coffin was closed, he thought he felt the slightest tremor, a twitch so faint it could have been imagination. His protests were dismissed by the elders, who said grief was clouding his judgment. Yet Edward's heart refused to believe. While others wept in resignation, he carried within him a silent certainty that Samuel's story was not yet over. This inner conflict tormented Edward. Should he defy tradition, risk ridicule, and act on a feeling no one else believed? Or should he bury his doubt along with his brother? That moment, a brother's quiet conviction against the voice of an entire town, would become the turning point of their fate. In Victorian America, death was treated not only with grief but also with ritual. One such custom was the practice of post-mortem photography, a final image of the deceased, often posed to look alive, meant to preserve memory in an age when photographs were rare and precious. For the Prescotts, who were of humble means, the idea of hiring a photographer seemed extravagant, but Edward insisted. He wanted his mother to have something tangible to remember Samuel by, a piece of him that would never fade. On the morning of the arranged photograph, Samuel's body was dressed in his Sunday clothes, his pale face carefully combed and arranged. The photographer instructed Edward to sit beside his brother, holding his hand for the portrait. Edward obeyed, though his heart was heavy. As the camera's lens focused, Edward gripped Samuel's cold fingers tightly, almost as if he could transfer life back into them. When the photograph was developed days later, Edward studied it with an intensity that unsettled the photographer. Something was wrong, or perhaps right. Samuel's lips were not tightly sealed like those of the dead. They appeared parted, as though caught mid-breath. His eyelids were not fully shut, showing a faint glimmer beneath. Most saw this as a trick of light, But Edward knew better. It was confirmation of what he had felt before. Samuel was not truly gone. That haunting photograph became more than just a keepsake. It was a silent cry for help frozen in time. For Edward, it was not a farewell, but a message urging him to act. Against doubt, ridicule, and fear, the image strengthened his conviction. The picture was not proof of death, it was proof of life waiting to be saved. Haunted by the photograph, Edward could not sleep. Night after night, he replayed the image in his mind, Samuel's lips slightly parted, his eyelids not entirely closed. It was more than coincidence. To Edward, it was a whisper of life, a plea that only a brother's heart could hear. Finally, unable to bear the torment any longer, he made a decision that would forever define his courage. On a moonlit night, Edward slipped quietly from his home and hurried to the graveyard, accompanied by a close friend who trusted his instincts. With shovels in hand, they dug feverishly at Samuel's fresh grave, their breaths ragged, their hearts pounding with fear and hope. Every strike of the spade felt like a battle against time. When at last they reached the coffin, Edward's hands trembled as he pried it open. What he saw stole his breath. Samuel's chest rose ever so faintly, and a shallow gasp escaped his lips. He was alive. Weak, trapped, but alive. Overcome with emotion, Edward lifted his brother into his arms, tears streaming freely. They carried Samuel home, where the family, shocked yet overjoyed, tended to him with warmth and care. Weeks of nourishment and rest slowly restored his strength. Against all odds, Samuel had returned from the edge of death, rescued not by medicine but by the unwavering faith of his brother. The discovery was more than a miracle of survival. It was proof of Edward's conviction that love, intuition, and courage can triumph even when the world dismisses you. Samuel's life was saved because one person refused to surrender to doubt. The Prescott Brothers' story did not fade with time. Instead, it became a tale whispered through generations. A reminder that even in the darkest hours, hope must never be abandoned. Samuel went on to live a long, purposeful life, often standing beside Edward to recount the incredible night he was saved. Their family treasured the post-mortem photograph, not as a symbol of death, but as proof that love and intuition can overcome even the greatest mistakes of man. Word of Samuel's survival spread through the town and beyond. Physicians began to take greater caution in declaring death, often waiting longer or double, checking signs before pronouncing a life extinguished. Families, too, were inspired to listen to their instincts, understanding that sometimes the faintest sign can mean the difference between farewell and salvation. The Prescotts, once simple farmers, became a symbol of resilience and the triumph of human faith. For Edward, the lesson was clear: when others give in to doubt, trust the quiet voice within. His courage to act when the world dismissed him turned tragedy into miracle. And for Samuel, every breath he took afterward was a living testament to the power of persistence and love. Even today, their story speaks across centuries. Never surrender to despair, never ignore the flicker of life, and never underestimate the strength of faith. The Prescott brothers remind us that sometimes survival itself is born not from medicine or science, but from unwavering belief and the refusal to give up.